Okay, so in my hands here, I have the Touptek StellaVita, formerly known as the Touptek AstroStation, and this is a direct and actually viable competitor to the ZW ASIAIR. And as background, if you're into astrophotography, after you buy like your telescope, your guide scope, guide camera, filter wheel, camera, etc., you need something to control all of that. Traditionally, it's been using PCs to control that, and there's tons of software like Nina to do so. But more recently, in the last few years, there's been the emergence of the ASIAIR as a really easy to use control center for such equipment, and that can be controlled via a very well done smartphone app. It's really incredible what you can do with the ASIAIR. Even recently, they've started integrating the ASIAIR into a camera. So this camera is both a main imaging camera cooled for astrophotography, an ASIAIR control center for your whole setup, and a guide camera all at once at the same time. It's pretty cool and really fun. But the main drawback of something like the ASIAIR is that it doesn't support anything other than ZW Astro cameras and DSLRs. It does not support anything else than the ZW EAF for an electronic focuser. It doesn't support anything else than the ZW electronic filter wheel for a filter wheel. It doesn't support anything else than ZW guide cameras for guide cameras. And it doesn't support anything else than the ZW CAA for rotators, etc. So you see what's happening. You get a super awesome control center. You get this really easy to use smartphone app. Everything is pretty much, as the slogan says for the ASIAIR, as easy as 1, 2, 3. But by using the ASIAIR, you are effectively restricting yourself to ZW equipment. What if there is an Astro camera that you think has better features than the ZW or better price, but you want to use the ASIAIR? But no, you're just going to go and buy the ZW camera instead, because you can use it with your preferred control center, right? That's the whole deal of the ASIAIR, and I think it's a very successful project, and I suspect it is literally a money printing machine for ZW, which is great. It's done a lot of things for the hobby because it has brought a lot of people to the hobby, and that cannot be denied. I've presented on the channel other control centers, from mini PCs that you can install free and open source software like Nina on, which work great once you've set them up, to this orange box that I have here on my telescope here, which is the StellarMate Pro that I'm using quite a lot these days. And that is, to some extent, a competitor to the ASIAIR, except it has more features. It can support a lot of other hardware, but it is very complex to use. Even though it does have an app to control everything, the level of complexity is not as easy as 1, 2, 3. So all of that, this long-winded introduction gets us to this, the Touptek StellaVita, because this is effectively a ZW ASIAIR clone, but it can support other hardware than ZW stuff. So I've been using it with Touptek stuff. So this is the setup that I've been using it for many nights actually already. And that's been like a SQ85 telescope. We have an EM31 Pro mount here. I've also tested it with the excellent Skywatcher Wave 150i mount. And I've been using it with a Touptek guide camera here, with a Touptek 585 monochrome camera, Touptek filter wheel and filters, Touptek electronic focuser. But I've also tried it with a ZW camera, the ASI 585MC Pro. It worked. I've tried it with a ZW guide camera, which I have here. It's the ZW ASI 220mm Mini, which is great as a guide camera, and it worked with this. And I tried it with the ZW EAF, and it works with the ZW EAF. So you see, the topic here is that you get something that works not only with ZW equipment, but with a lot of other equipment. So you keep your freedom of use while getting a really cool smartphone app that is also easy to use. And I'll show you later in the video exactly how to use it. It also doubles as a tutorial video for when this becomes actually available. And this is, as I was mentioning, it's basically a clone of the ASIAIR. Specifically, the ASIAIR Plus is probably the closest that we have to this. Guys, Cuiv from the future here, interrupting a little bit because I just want to let you know that by the time I release the video, the Touptek StellaVita is actually going to be available on the international market, and I have tested it again and again across many successful nights since making this video with the latest version of the software, which is going to be what is released abroad. And I'll have the links to the StellaVita directly from Touptek that you can buy without any issues down in the description. In the video, I'll be referring to the fact that the StellaVita is not available yet, etc., etc. It's not the case. It is absolutely available and you can get it. I also stand by everything I say in the review going forward, and you'll see it's mostly positive, but I also want to give a word of warning that this could be, to some extent, equipment dependent. For instance, when Luke from the Lucomatico channel started testing the StellaVita, he found it very frustrating, couldn't make it to work with the AM5N mount, for instance. And when I tested after talking with him on my AM5N, I saw the same issue. But then Touptek immediately fixed the bug. Currently it works perfectly fine on the AM5N, but there are still some stuff with the equipment, parts of equipment that are not supported. For instance, the QHY Minicam 8, as it is right now, I cannot use it with the StellaVita. It recognizes the filter wheel, can't connect to it, it doesn't recognize the camera yet. So it's a work in progress for a lot of equipment, and I do think that Touptek is planning on putting up a list of equipment that they have tested with and is officially supported, or something similar to that. And so this is something you should definitely take into account when making a decision to purchase this product or not. I've tested it with a variety of equipment, but of course this is just limited to the equipment that I have on hand, and your experience might be different. That said, again, I still stand by my review of this product, and I say in the video that it is a preview video, but since then I've used it night after night after night with the final version, or close to the final version of the software, and it's been working well for me. So I think I can actually reclassify this as a review. But you make your own decision. Make sure that when you purchase that, you have to understand that the experience can be equipment dependent. Okay, with that, let's go back to the video. So if you look at this box, it's a box with an antenna for Wi-Fi connectivity that is very close to the ZW-ASIAIR Plus. And this box with this Wi-Fi antenna, it generates its own Wi-Fi hotspot, just like the ZW-ASIAIR does. It does not require any external network. It can work in the middle of nowhere with no network coverage at all. It generates its own network, and this is so that you can get peer-to-peer direct connectivity between a smartphone and this via the hotspot that it generates. In terms of the range of the antenna, in my tests, it's not great. It's there, it's fine, it's not great, it's very close, it's almost the same, I would say, as the vanilla ZW-ASIAIR Plus. And I think the hardware inside is basically the same thing. So we get this antenna here. We also get on the side a USB port that you can use to get your files from the Touptek StellaVita. It does not work yet in my beta version as far as I know, but it will when it gets released. And you also have a full-size SD card reader here, where you can input your SD card so that you can save all of the images that this is taking into an SD card rather than the internal storage of the StellaVita. The internal storage, by the way, is 32 gigs, 28 of which are available to the end user. On this side here, we have two USB 3 ports and two USB 2 ports, as well as a network port if you want to connect the Touptek StellaVita to your home network using a wired connection. And going back to the antenna on this, we have a power switch together with a power input. This is DC 12 volt. And then on the side here, we have 4 DC output ports that you can turn on and off in the app, just like the ASIAIR. And those ports, I believe it's up to 12 volts, 5 amps. So it's good to provide power to your camera, to your focuser if it needs it, maybe to a dew heater, that kind of stuff. But maybe better not to use it, just like the ASIAIR, not to use it with your mount, for instance. It all depends on what your mount is, what your payload is, etc., etc. But basically, overall, it seems to me from a hardware perspective, pretty much a clone of the ASIAIR Plus. Now, there is something else that comes in the box. There's, the power cables, the USB cables, all of that good stuff comes in the box. But also, we get this little tiny Wi-Fi adapter. And I know that a lot of people who use the ASIAIR Plus also have used similar adapters. So you can sacrifice one of your USB ports. There's even one that's written as Wi-Fi, like please sacrifice me kind of thing. And if you sacrifice one of those ports, what happens is that this little adapter can create its own Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi has better range than the antenna, like much better range than the antenna. And also, once you have connected this, you can use this Touptek StellaVita in station mode, or they call it bridge mode, whereby you have two Wi-Fi networks. You have the Wi-Fi network that the Astro Station, the StellaVita, creates via this antenna, and then you have your home network that it connects to via the other antenna. Or the other Wi-Fi adapter. So you can see from a hardware standpoint, we have something that is extremely similar to the ASIAIR. But what about the app? How do you control off your equipment? You just need to connect your USB cables to it, connect the guide camera, connect the main camera, connect the filter wheel, etc., the mount, and you need to provide power via the DC outputs, the usual stuff, right? Once that's set up and you turn it on, how does it work? Let's have a look together at the smartphone app and also how it performs under the stars. Oh, and before we go to the app, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment down below to tell me what you think of this StellaVita from a hardware standpoint for the time being. It really helps to support the channel, and if you want to support the channel even more at no cost to you and you're planning on buying anything from Amazon, Agena, High Point Scientific, First Light Optics, etc., if you do so after clicking one of the links that I have down in the description, it will help me out at no cost to you. And of course, if you want to sponsor the channel directly and help make those videos possible, you can join my channel as a member. It's the join button next to the subscribe button, or you can join my Patreon as a Patreon supporter. Some of my Patreon ranks have access to my videos early and without ads. You guys, channel members, Patreon members, you know it. You make this channel possible. Thank you so much for your help. Anyway, let's have a look at this app. And so we are at night, and we can look at how the StellaVita app to control the whole equipment will work. I'm going to remove the dust caps on all of the equipment because that can be helpful when you want to do an imaging session from time to time. And yes, I am in the app, in the StellaVita app, and let me show you how it works. So we have tons of tabs on the left-hand side, and I'll start with this gear icon tab, which is all of the equipment connection and settings for the Touptek StellaVita. So you can see I can connect my mount, my main camera, my guide camera, my filter wheel, my electronic focuser, and then some miscellaneous settings. So I'll go to the mounts, I'll just connect everything for now, and then I'll show you all of the settings for each piece of equipment. So we have the mount. You can see you have a ton of mounts that are available, just like in something like the ASIAIR. The start scan button will also detect whatever mount is connected to the Astro Station, to the StellaVita, and I'm just going to connect to it for now. And once it's connected, I'll go to the main camera, and again, you can choose your camera from the list. I'm just going to connect to it. And by the way, I'm going to disconnect. And in the list, for now, for instance, within the list, I cannot find anywhere ZW cameras. But the moment I plugged in my ZW585 and MC Pro camera, it appeared in the list, right? So the list that you see is not what you see, is what you get until you plug in the equipment. But anyway, let's connect the main camera, which is the ATR 585M from Touptek. So it's a monochrome IMX 585 camera. And I'll do the same for the guide camera. Again, you have the list. Just connect to it. Same for the filter wheel. I can choose my filter wheel, connect to it. And the electronic focuser, which is the Touptek AAF, which I can connect to. So now all of my equipment is connected. I'll go back to the mount tab. And in the mount tab, you can see we have the mount information. And I have the ability to sync to the mount from my smartphone. So if my smartphone location and time are accurate, but the mount's internal information is not, we can see it there and use the sync to mount button to get all of the information from the smartphone into the mount. If I scroll down some more, we have some information about parking the mount, about sending it to home. We can turn on the tracking, choose the type of tracking, check the guide rate of the mount, and then we also have some parameters about whether we want the mount, when we tell it to slew to target, whether it should just slew and stop, or slew and center, or ask us every time. And for me, I have it set up to ask every time. So whenever I choose a target, it will ask me like, hey, do you want to just slew to the target? Or do you want us to do some plate solving to actually automatically center the target? And if it's automatically centering the target, it will use whatever settings I have here in terms of the camera gain and the camera exposure. So it will slew to the target, take an exposure, in my case, of 5 seconds at gain 100, look at the stars in there, and then fine-tune its targeting position based on the stars that it has analyzed. And then we have at the very bottom the standard meridian flip stuff. So I have the meridian flip enabled, and I'm telling the StellaVita that I want to stop tracking 5 minutes before meridian, and then we'll do the flip 5 minutes after the meridian. I've also set up my mount limits so that the limit is actually exactly as the mount hits the meridian. With on step, it means my meridian east and meridian west settings are 0. And also at the very bottom, we have the reversed declination output after meridian flip. This is for guiding purposes. For a lot of on-step mounts, this needs to be turned on. For most other mounts, like if you have a Skywatcher mount, for instance, this should be turned off. If you ever do a meridian flip and you see that your guiding is going haywire, especially the declination guiding going haywire, like going further and further away from the center of the chart, it's usually because this setting is incorrect. Okay, so now we've looked at the mount settings. Let's look at the main camera settings. So we have the resolution, we have the binning, and you can see I've set my telescope focal length. This is the SQ85 to the 408 millimeter focal length. And you can see I have things like gain, exposure. I'm not sure exactly when this exposure is set. I think it is the default exposures for preview. So that's what this exposure is. And then we have the gain conversion, high conversion gain, low conversion gain, or HDR, which are settings that are available for Touptek cameras. ZW cameras do not have that, for instance. They'll switch between the modes automatically depending on what overall gain you've chosen. And then we have refrigeration. So yes, I want to cool the camera, and I turned it on, and now it's cooling to minus 10 degrees Celsius. The heating is actually the dew heater. On Touptek cameras, it's not just an on-off, it's actually a level of heating. For me, in my conditions, I see that a level of heating of 1 is fine. And then the black level is actually the offset setting of the camera. Then we have an auto recapture setting that if you have a failure, try to auto recapture. I've never had an issue up to now, so that I have it off, but they probably built that for a reason. So that's the main camera is all set up, and it's cooling now, so we're good. The guide camera, similar stuff. This time the focal length is set to my Touptek guide scope focal length, which is 200 millimeters. And I've set my gain. And I do not want to have auto exposure while guiding because I want my guide exposures to be relatively short since this is a strain wave gear type of mount. And then we have the usual settings for RA, deck, and then the minimum movement for RA and deck. So it's actually running a version of PhD2 in the background, just like the ZW ASIAIR is. And then we have the dither settings, as always. So we can choose our dither scale, which for me is 10 pixels, but I could probably, 10 pixels is good, because that means that on the main telescope, which has double the focal length, but roughly the same size of pixels, I'll be dithering by 20 pixels, so that's exactly what I want. Random dither mode, the dither interval, because I'm doing narrowband a lot of the time, it's going to be every single exposure. And we have the usual stuff like settle when the dither is within 2 pixels for more than 3 seconds. And if it takes longer than 30 seconds, just stop the settling and keep exposing your images. So this is the usual settings that you see in other systems like the ASIAIR. Then we have the filter wheel. We have the slots here that are available. So currently it's on the luminance filter, red, green, blue, etc. And I can change on each the name of the filter. You can see if I tap on any of those, I can change not only the name of the filter, but also tell it what autofocus gain and autofocus exposure time I should be using. So you can see for sulfur 2, H-alpha, oxygen 3, my autofocus exposure time will be 8 seconds. For luminance, red, green, and blue, it's going to be just 1 second. And I kind of wish we had filter offsets as well, and as well as a default autofocus filter, because then I could just autofocus with the luminance filter, which takes much less time, and then switch over to the H-alpha and sulfur 2 oxygen 3 filter. That would be so convenient, but it is not to be for now. Also, the current filter position, it's only a number, so you can look at those numbers and you need to refer to those names underneath. It would be nice if it could just inherit the names that we have in there. So if I want to go to sulfur 2, I need to select number 5, and now I hear the actual filter wheel moving to the sulfur 2. I'll go back to number 1 for luminance. There we are. And then I can check the electronic focuser. So we have the temperature measured by the focuser. We have the current position. I can move the position of the focuser, and then we have the settings for what should be the focuser movement for a coarse movement, for a fine movement, and what is going to be the autofocus step size. So for me, it's 20 steps of the focuser, which works well. And also the overshoot step, which is the overshoot backlash adjustment, effectively, that I've set to 300 and seems to be working very well for the system. Okay, so that's for all of the equipment itself. If I go to the miscellaneous settings, I can control each of the power ports independently. Right now, I've all turned it on because I don't really care, and you can have like as a memory item for you, whether it's a camera, focuser, or mount. Doesn't have any other alternatives. Could be good for later down the line for like flat panels, but for now we don't really care. And you can use the built-in storage, which is what I use right now, or if you have an SD card plugged in, use the SD card. And you can choose, your Wi-Fi settings. You can connect to your home Wi-Fi, which is what I've already done for the station mode. You have all of the information, all of the stuff you need in there, and you can check for updates as well. So this is all of the settings themselves, and that's already, I think, really cool to see that. So now let's look at the other tabs. You have the folder tab, you have breadcrumbs at the top, so I could go to Touptek, and if I set on DSIM, I'm actually looking at the inside of the Touptek Astro Station. You can see I have like images on the Thor Nebula, and this is what I have from yesterday night imaging session, so I can see what's going on there. We also have a histogram, kind of widget, a guide widget, and so we can have both our one or both or another like at any given time. So this is pretty cool. And then we have things like the autofocus widget. I can move the focuser manually there using the arrows. I can look at the guide camera, and the icon on the right would be to tell it to start guiding. I'm not going to do that yet. And I could also change the exposure time, by the way, to the guide camera. So for now, it's 1 second. I could also change the gain as necessary. And then the main camera is the interesting stuff. I can choose the exposure time, and I can take an exposure, see what we get. And this is what we get. So we are not perfectly in focus, but close enough, I guess, for now. I could open up the electronic focuser and try to move in one direction, see whether the focus got better or worse. And it got better, so I'll move it one more step. And now the focus is much better. We're almost in good focus. And I could tap on the autofocus thing to basically do a run of autofocus. We could try it actually right now. Let's do it. Autofocus. And now it's working on it. Hopefully the light from my balcony light will not mess with it too much. But you can see it's updating the autofocus curve. It seems to have had some backlash issue at the very start. So maybe I need to look again at my backlash settings, but it shouldn't be a problem. And here we are. The autofocus has succeeded. And this is the result, and it's done. It was actually really, really fast. So that's really awesome to see. So that's with the autofocus related stuff. Okay, and now we can have a look at the other tab, which is the mount tab there, where we can actually look at a target of history that I've slewed to. So I could say like, yeah, let's try to go to and center on the Horsehead Nebula, see what happens. And there it is, slewing away towards the Horsehead Nebula. Okay, it's on target. Now we'll let it center the Horsehead Nebula, see what happens. The light on my balcony is really not going to help there, but yeah, let's see. Let's see if it can actually figure it out. Okay, center target completed, confirm. And indeed, we are actually on target. I can see Alnitak, and I can see the Flame Nebula there. So it's working. So you can also, of course, go back home, for instance. So I could say like, okay, go home, and it will move back the mount to home. But also you can go to the star library to choose a target from your history, from tonight's best, from your favorites, or you can search for a target. And to search for a target, it's still not great. Like if I search for Orion, I kind of don't see anything. If I search for M42, it will appear here, and I could slew to it. So I could select M42, click on here, and then I can choose whether to go to and center, or cancel everything. You also have, if you deselect everything, you have access on the bottom left to this galaxy icon. So if I tap there, there will be a star atlas, basically, where you can search for targets. Well, you can't actually search for targets yet. You have to browse for targets and then zoom in, and then you can choose your framing there on the target itself. Once the framing is good, you could tap on Go To, so it would then go to the target just like we've done, or you can add it as a capture item in a plan. So I could say capture item there, and you can see we're now in the plan tab, which is the top left, and I could call that the Pelican, because this is actually the Pelican Nebula. And validate that, and I have now this set up as a target in my plan. I don't actually want to image the Pelican Nebula, so I'm just going to swipe there to delete that. But this is a little quick spoiler on the plans themselves. Of course, we also have the ability to do a polar alignment. So I could just tap on polar alignment. It will give me some instructions there. And now I can start the polar alignment by simply pressing the start button, and it will take an exposure, move the mount, take another exposure, move the mount again, and it's basically just a standard 3-point polar alignment. And there it is moving for the second time, for the third exposure. And it's done. And it tells me that in my I should lower the mount by 10 arc minutes and move the azimuth to the left by 30 arc minutes. So let's do that. So I've moved the azimuth. I can press on refresh. And there we are very close in azimuth. So I'm satisfied with that. And I should lower the mount a little bit. Okay, I've lowered it a tiny bit. Let's refresh, see what happens. Okay, and we are very close. We're only 3 arc minutes. I lowered the mount a tiny bit, some more. And when it's really close, it actually plays a sound to tell us, like, yeah, you're close to the goal. I think this is good enough, so I can stop this. And we are good to go with the polar alignment. So you see, it's very, like, overall, very, very easy. I can tap here to remove the polar alignment, and overall, things are working really well. So now let's look at the plan feature. So I'm just going to go back to the mount for a moment, tell it to go home again. So there it is. It is going home exactly as I want it to. And now let's go to the plans. So as you saw earlier, I could simply go to my Sky Atlas, so unselect everything, go to the Sky Atlas, and select something. Let's say I want to take an image of whatever for this star for whatever reason. Capture target, you can see it added target 2 here with, you can change the target name, and you have the coordinates that are set up already. And I can slew the target. I can tell it I want to center the target, then start guiding, and I want to also autofocus at the beginning, autofocus on filter change. I could also autofocus on temperature change, and actually I would love to see autofocus after 60 minutes, after X minutes. That actually, I am absolutely baffled that it's not available. It absolutely should be, but it is what it is. And you can also stop the guiding during autofocus. And when you're ready, once you're ready with those general settings, you can go to task management, and there you can set your tasks. I can add a new task, and we'll say, like, we'll take a light frame, let's say with the lumens filter, and my exposure time would be 30 seconds, the gain will be 100, bin is this, and we can say, like, we want to take 60 frames of 30 seconds for now. And it's going to be a light frame. And then if I click on plus again, it will actually make an exact copy of what I have selected. So I could say, like, everything is the same except now it's the red filter. And then I can tap plus again and say, now it's the green filter. Everything else is the same. And I press plus again. I could go to the blue filter. No, not sulfur. The blue filter. And there we go. We have a plan that is ready there. I can save it, go back to target management. And if I unselect everything, I can also have some other settings that are available. Like I want to park the telescope upon finish. And I also want to warm the camera upon finish. This is the turn off tech upon finish. I can also shut down the StellaVita if I want to, but I actually don't want to. So that's fine. But I don't really want to image a random star. So I'm just going to delete this target and show you what I have in the Thor Nebula. So I have all of those settings as well. And within the task management, I take exposures for the hydrogen alpha filter, for the oxygen 3 filter, and for the sulfur 2 filter. And I take 20 exposures of 5 minutes each. And that is my plan, which is, it works really, really well. So I could also go back to the main camera. And if I tap on the main camera a second time, I can select plan. And if I tap on the start button, it will actually start this plan as is, which, again, pretty cool. It's going to just work everything on its own. Or I could do things a bit more manually. I could go to the mount stuff, go to the star library, and in there I can search for NGC, 2359, I think? Yeah, that's it, 2359 for the Thor Nebula. And I can tap on the mount icon, do a go to and center, and I'm going to turn off the lights. And now I can let it center the target. Hopefully it's going to work, because I'm not sure whether the stars are actually visible right now for the telescope. But I think the moment I get center target 1, it actually means that it's working, so we don't have any issues there. Okay, center target is completed. We can have a look. Yeah, there are stars definitely in there. And I could, manually go to the guide camera and say like, hey, start guiding. And this is this button there. And what it does there is it does multi-star guiding by default. And it does not have any calibration, like guide calibration management, like the ASIAIR does. So it does not remember the calibration, which is a bit of a bummer. I wish it did. And each time it will actually recalibrate from scratch, which is what it's doing right now. While we're waiting for that, I can go back to the main camera and I can show you the histogram, by the way. And I find this histogram to be super useful for taking flat frames, because I can find exactly, the level that I want for my flat frames. And for now, I'm just going to wait for the guiding calibration to be done. It usually takes just like a couple of minutes, so it's not the end of the world. But it would be nice if we could just remember everything and then, get back to it automatically like the ASIAIR does. Okay, and now the calibration is done, so we are guiding, and so I could just display the guide chart, and we see the guide chart here available with all of the information that we need. So some things about this guide chart. The scale seems to be wrong. The oscillations you will see seem to be less than what they should be on the chart. So maybe it's just psychological. It makes it easier for you to look at your guiding. Overall, guiding is PhD 2, right? So it works really well. Another thing is the corrections. I don't know if it's super visible, but you can see that, for instance, here, when RA, right ascension in blue, deviated towards the bottom, the guide correction is also towards the bottom. That's actually incorrect. It's a visual bug. The guide correction should be shown to the and we have the exact same phenomenon here. So the RA corrections are actually shown in the wrong direction. So that's a little display bug. Declination, though, is fine. By the way, a little tip, you can double click or double tap on the guiding to basically clear the chart and see the results, your total RMS, for instance, from the very beginning, like from scratch, without like any parasite data from when the guiding was just getting started, for instance. But you can see it's just working excellently there, where we're basically manually on target, and I could take like an exposure, etc. But what I'm going to do is more simple. I'll simply go to my plan there and deselect Thor, and I can tap on Start Capture. I could go to my main camera and select Plan, and then click the main button there, and just let it be. And that is what it will do. It will actually do a whole session as I set up, and I've done it night after night after night after night. It just keeps working really, really well. No problem whatsoever. So I can just tap on that, and it will just get started. So let's do that. Tap on it. So now it's, go to the target, centering the target, even though it's already done effectively, but the plan tells it has to do that. Now it is centering the target, so we can see all of the updates at the bottom of the screen there. So center target 1. Then it's starting the guiding, and the autofocus is starting. So it's guiding. It actually reused the calibration. I think the calibration changes every night. I'm not sure anymore, or maybe with every slew. I'm not sure anymore. Maybe the calibration management has gotten better. And you can see it's now doing all of the autofocus automatically. But for now, it's actually doing the autofocus with the luminance filter again. And in my setup, I told it to autofocus at the very start, but also autofocus after filter change. So what's going to happen is it will switch to the H alpha filter and then do a second round of autofocusing. So that's a little bit of wasted time. I think I should have, I should have not selected to autofocus from the start of the sequence, just autofocus on filter change, and that would have been more efficient. But here you can see suddenly we are really well in focus. I'm going to remove the guiding curve, and you can see that's our focus right now. But now, if I go to my plan, it should go to the H alpha filter, and now it is autofocusing again. You can see, a little bit of wasted time, but that is human error rather than an issue with the StellaVita there. Okay, the autofocus is done. It's downloading the last frame, I believe. Now we are perfectly in focus. One of the things that I don't like with the sequence and with the autofocus during the sequence is we don't see a chart anymore. I wish we could see the chart of autofocus while in sequence as well. I don't know why they don't show it when we're in sequence. That would be very, very useful to see, especially since there are no human readable logs that we can get out of the StellaVita. So there are log files, but they're only for Touptek. I haven't been able to open them in a legible format for me to see what's going to happen. It actually seems to be encoded for whatever reason. But now it's guiding. And we can see on the right-hand side, the button is showing an exposure in progress. So I'll let it do its first exposure to show you how it looks like. But I've been using it for, I think, 10 nights, a bit more than that actually, like quite a lot. And it works flawlessly overall. I had some issues at first with the meridian flip, but I figured them out. It was more of an on-step problem than it was a Touptek problem. And I had some issues with parking the mount at the end of the night, but again, it was my mount. I hadn't set up the park position properly, so that was on me as well. By the way, because I've been talking and gesticulating right next to the mount, on my balcony you can see that the guiding is not going to be great. Our first exposure will definitely have star trails. This is not because of the StellaVita. This is because of yours truly bothering his astrophotography equipment. I am so sorry. Okay, the first exposure is done. It is now downloading. Let's see what the result is. I'm going to hide the charts, and there we go. We have the Thor Nebula exactly as I expected because I'm gesticulating. We have some really weird tracking issues, but it is what it is. It's my fault, not the equipment. But look at that. We're getting our first exposure, and now it is probably doing the dithering. Yes, it has done the dither, and it's back to imaging for the second exposure. And that's it. It does everything else automatically. It is just like the ASIAIR, as easy as 1, 2, 3. And we are starting to get a real competitor with the same ease of use as the ASIAIR, but supporting a lot more equipment. So I am very, very excited about this Touptek StellaVita. Okay, so now that we've done a night of imaging with the StellaVita or AstroStation, how do we get the files onto the computer? There's two ways, obviously. There is the SD card. If you've saved onto the SD card, you can just take it and plug it into your PC or an SD card reader and get the data out of there. You can also, in the future, do it via the integrated USB-C port, but it's not active right now as I was testing. And we can also access everything via network. And so for me, using the Wi-Fi parameters on the StellaVita, I was able to see that the IP address of my AstroStation was this, 0.213. And then once I get to it, I can access this AstroStation folder and I can look at all of the data that's in there. And we have here the Thor data that I've taken across multiple nights in the end. By the way, taking images of the Thor's helmet, I guess, in Tokyo during the full moon, it is a very stupid endeavor. And that's what I did because it's low on the horizon. It's often hidden by one side of my balcony. I don't have a lot of time that I can get on it, and threatened by the light pollution and the moonlight. It's a bit of a disaster. I'm not very happy with what I got, but I'll show you what I got taken with the AstroStation across 3 nights, if I remember correctly. And these are the raw stacks that we get. This is oxygen 3, we have H alpha, and then we have sulfur 2 here as well that I took with the Touptek StellaVita. And after some processing, or actually 10 minutes worth of processing, this is the results that I got. It's a difficult target, so it's not a very satisfying result. But yeah, from Tokyo, it's pretty good. We can definitely see the helmet, we can see the nebulosity around, and I don't really want to zoom in because the details, I put too much noise reduction. It just kind of breaks down and is not very pretty as you zoom in, but taken from far away, it's very passable. And of course, I did take some other images across multiple nights with the Astro Station. I took this image of the Rosette Nebula. I took this image of the Horsehead Nebula. I also took an image of the Tadpoles Nebula, but I haven't processed it yet. So I've had a lot of nights with the Astro Station, taking all of those images from Tokyo. And so my first impressions based on all of those nights and also the software in progress is, first, I want to give credit where credit is due. During my whole test period, not only Touptek, with Alexei in particular, was helping me with any technical issues that I was having, but also the YouTuber Martin from AstroFromHome, who has a channel with tons of details about the Touptek Astro Station. I'll put the link down in the description and maybe up above to one of his videos if you want to learn more about the StellaVita. He has a lot of information and he helped me a lot throughout my testing period. So kudos, thank you so much, Martin, for all of your help. But anyway, based on all of my experience with the Astro Station, I would say that overall it is a very good product that works mostly out of the box, and it does not have feature parity with the ASIAIR for now. It's lacking like rotator support, that kind of stuff, but it exceeds the ASIAIR in other areas, most notably the hardware support, right? So it can support much more hardware than just Touptek stuff. However, I hear that the current drivers have some issues with the PlayerOne astrophoto cameras, but I'm sure that will get fixed in the near future. And overall, I would say the StellaVita has accomplished their main objective of having an as easy as 1, 2, 3 competitor to the ZW ASIAIR. And I've made sure that you could see all of the interface, all of the flows in my videos, so you can make a judgment for yourself to see whether you would be comfortable with such a solution. Some of the things that I liked less or that I had some issues with were the Wi-Fi connectivity. Now it's working really well, but for example, in the station mode, I have actually 2 different Wi-Fi networks, even 3 different Wi-Fi networks in my house. They're all being projected by the same router. And when I'm using the ASIAIR, for instance, I can be on one of those networks, the ASIAIR on a separate network, but my smartphone, like the app, and the ASIAIR managed to see each other without issues. With the Touptek Astro Station or StellaVita, it's not the case. So I have to be on the same network, but otherwise it works like the Wi-Fi connectivity is working quite well. Another issue that I've had is with the autofocus, specifically with narrowband filters. And I had to put my autofocus exposures to 10 seconds with narrowband filters to really get good results with autofocusing. And obviously that takes a lot of time when you have 10-second autofocus exposures. And sometimes I've seen that during my imaging of the Tadpoles Nebula, for instance, I would have, even the Thor's helmet, I would have some exposures that were basically a series of exposure until we got to the next filter or until we got to the temperature change that triggered a new autofocus that was out of focus. And so I never had this issue when I was testing. I did a whole sequence with just the LRGB filters, but it was on a random star, so I didn't really process it or do anything with it. I never had issues with broadband filters, but with narrowband filters, sometimes the autofocus had issues. And the worst part for me is that as a technical person, I don't have any logs to double check what the heck went wrong, right? There's nothing for me to go and see like, okay, maybe it detected the wrong star. And even if I was watching the sequence while it's happening, because when you're in a sequence, it doesn't show you the autofocus chart or it doesn't show you which star it has chosen. You're in the blind, you don't know what's going on. And I hope that Touptek can improve that so that when there are issues, we can actually do something about it. And maybe they should consider doing like ZW and going for the 2-pass autofocus algorithms, which is what ZW seems to be using. Those algorithms are built into the open source software that both the ASIAIR and the Touptek Astrostation StellaVita rely on, which is ECOS K-stars. And it seems that Touptek has chosen the 1-pass, which is very fast and works quite well most of the time, and ZW went with the 2-pass algorithm. Maybe Touptek should investigate the 2-pass algorithms. But otherwise, it's working quite well. I had this issue just some of the time, and with 10 seconds, it seems to have been like mostly gone away, but it's still something that I remember as having some issues with when doing my imaging. That said, my filters are very narrow, like 3.5 to 4 nanometer narrowband filters. I believe that with 7 nanometer filters or even 5 nanometer filters, we'd have much fewer issues. Otherwise, overall, it's been working extremely well. I don't really have any complaints, and I've used it for many nights, at least 10, probably more nights. And it's just been like really as easy as 1, 2, 3. So I think main objective is done. It has more features than the initial ASIAIR when it was released had. And I think they're really playing catch up, but they're advancing very quickly to really cover the same feature sets that the ASIAIR has. Obviously, an issue right now is that their app is for Android only, but they're working on an iOS version as well, which will come out soon. If you're interested in getting the Astrostation, it's not officially available for the international market right now, but if you're an adventurous soul and you want your Astrostation, StellaVita, as soon as possible, it's available on AliExpress, so I'll put some links down below if you want to give it a shot. Not guaranteed, I did not buy from those links, I don't know if they work, but I've heard of people on cloudy nights ordering from there, so fingers crossed. With that, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. What features would you like to see in the StellaVita? For me, it probably would be filter offsets and maybe focus every X minutes. And maybe also dither at the sequence level rather than global level. But yeah, let me know what you wish to have. Leave a like on the video, it really helps the channel out because it is a lot of work. And if you want to support me even more and you're planning on buying anything from Agena, High Point Scientific, Amazon, etc., if you do so after clicking the links that I have down in the description, it helps me out at no cost to you. Of course, you can sponsor me directly as a Patreon member. The link is down in the description. Or as a channel member, it's the join button next to the subscribe button. And it is you, my sponsors, who make this channel possible. Anyway, thank you so much for watching till the end. I'll leave you with my Patreon supporter credits, along with my zooming in, not too much, hopefully, Thor's helmet Nebula photo. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.